Welcome back to Wealth-ology. For today's video, we will be going to talk about how to invest for beginners in 2022 by Robert Kiyosaki. Let's get started. So, I'll share the 5 main takeaways from Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad's Guide to Investing, the third book in the Rich Dad series. At the age of 12, Robert walked with the man he calls his rich dad along a beach. Suddenly, Rich Dad pointed at a piece of real estate by the ocean and said, "You see that large house? I just bought it." At that point, Robert could not understand how his so-called rich dad could afford that seemingly very expensive piece of real estate, because at the time, Rich Dad wasn't, rich yet. When Robert asked about it, he got the following answer: "Well, I couldn't afford it, but my company could." The principles in this book come from Robert's rich dad, and under his supervision, Robert was able to acquire significant riches. Let's look at the takeaways to see if we can duplicate the formula. Takeaway number 1: create assets that buy assets. Despite having a terrific job and a much greater salary than Robert's rich dad, Robert realized that his real father would never be able to afford the beach property indicated in the introduction. Rich Dad said that Robert's real father had spent his life working hard for money that had built someone else's fortune. But Rich Dad has spent years building his own wealth and his own business. Rich Dad teaches that if you want to make a lot of money, you must first establish your own asset. Paying by the hour is unlikely to make you wealthy. As Warren Buffett puts it, if you don't find a way to make money while you're sleeping, you will work until you die. You can achieve the second kicker that will help you extend your asset column, which is the acquisition of other assets if you have successfully built an asset that delivers a positive cash flow. Always try to invest in assets that will help you straighten your cash flow so that any surpluses may be used to buy other assets. This goes on, and when done correctly, you will notice a compounding impact. One of the key advantages to investing by utilizing the cash flow from your assets in a business rather than your paycheck is that the cash flow can be spent as a gross income because it hasn't been paid out to anyone by parent company yet. Rich Dad was able to use this gross income to buy assets through his company and pay taxes on remaining net income. But Robert's real father paid taxes on growth income and then attempted to acquire assets with his net income. There's also the issue of security. There are always hazards associated with owning the operating assets, whether you operate the assets as an individual or through a corporation. The risks are essentially the same. However, if any risk arises, you will be by far more protected if your assets are owned and administered by a business rather than you as an individual. Takeaway number 2: use debt as a lever. There are numerous opposing viewpoints on debt. Debt is viewed as terrible, hazardous, and something that should be avoided at all costs by one camp. On the other hand, there is a faction that considers debt to be a tool that can help you obtain big wealth more quickly. As the first camp says, there is bad debt, according to Robert Kiyosaki. However, as the later camp points out, there is also good debt. The distinction is in the purpose of the debt and how it affects your cash flow. Let's begin with the bad debt. As persons in the middle class advance in their careers and earn more money, they become eligible to take on more debt. This debt is frequently utilized to purchase a more expensive home, a new car, or a luxury boat, among other things. This bad debt because it requires their cash flow and increases their reliance on their next salary. Using this awful form of debt to finance new fancy items becomes a death trap for anyone waiting to grow wealth over time, as this behavior of spending cash and using debt to finance new fancy things is addictive in nature. As a result, as their income rises, so does their bad personal debt, and the cycle continues. Good debt, on the other hand, leads to increased cash flow. The wealthy employ this type of loan. They are qualified to take on more debt because their assets generate a robust cash flow. This new debt is being utilized to leverage current cash flow rather than purchase additional obligations. This is accomplished by either increasing the yield on present assets or acquiring new assets. This process is also self-reinforcing, but instead of a destructive spiral, it creates a good one. Takeaway number 3: minimize expenses, minimize income. When Robert was 9 years old, he was mowing the grass for his rich dad. This work paid Robert 10 cents each hour. Robert requested a raise from his wealthy father one day. Rich dad did not raise his pay or even discuss it. Instead, he withdrew it entirely. Rich dad didn't want Robert to become addicted to hourly pay. So he said, paying people to do work is training them to think like employees. You might wonder what employees think. That in order to move ahead financially, you must maximize your earnings through your wage and then live frugally by reducing your spending. Robert's rich dad, on the other hand, believes that instead of focusing on increasing your income, you should focus on increasing your expenses. The first section on reducing income emphasizes the need of not become reliant on a salary. As rich dad sought to teach 9-year-old Robert, you should have your company reinvest all surplus capital and reduce the amount of personal income taken out. The second portion, maximizing expenses, is also perplexing. But that's because you might be considering the incorrect expenses. The types of expenses that should be maximized are those that will assist you in growing your firm. Attending a seminar, purchasing a book, learning a new skill, expanding your workforce, obtaining new assets. These are all costs that will eventually allow you to escape the rat race. As Rich Dad puts it, most people eventually lose their money and go broke because they continue to think like a poor person. A poor people want high income and low expenses. If you never make that mental flip, you'll be stuck attempting to live as cheapy as possible in order to compensate for your fear of losing money. You'll realize that there's another side to the coin. Once you grasp why a wealthy person might choose high expenses and little income. Takeaway number 4. Acquire the 3 E's. Rich Dad believes that in order to be a good investor and a businessman, you need 3 things: education, experience, and excess cash. If you want to be able to recognize and seize the possibilities that are always present and in motion, you'll need all 3 E's. Let us begin with the first, education. This one is simple, yet it's still necessary. A solid understanding of business is required. This includes how they work, industry dynamics, and perhaps most significantly, a thorough understanding of how to use the X-ray, reading financial statements, to be precise. Anything you do without education will be pure conjecture, and the outcomes will follow. Experience. The next step is to gain practical business experience. Rich Dad used to hand his kid and Robert Kiyosaki a blank financial statement and urged them to fill in the asset column with whatever. Rich Dad did this because he believed that the greatest way to gain business expertise is to start your own company. He didn't care what his trainers began. All he cared about was that they began anything. They were encouraged to create, fail, learn from their mistakes, adjust, and develop something new. Fail again, learn something new, adjust, and create till they achieved success. Extra money. Excess cash, according to Rich Dad, does not require the same level of attention as the first 2 E's. This is because after you have a good degree and the necessary experience, you will surely have extra money. This is the stage when you maintain complete control over your assets, use cash flow to acquire other assets, and employ sound leverage to accelerate wealth building. When people graduate from high school, they typically look for jobs rather than opportunities, and from there the downward spiral begins, with cash becoming trash. Armed with the 3 E's, you'll never lose out on a terrific opportunity just because it doesn't require a corporate ladder climb. Takeaway number 5. Start today. Robert Kiyosaki's first business was forced upon him as a part-time employment by his rich dad, and now Robert himself is recommending it. If you need to put food on the table for yourself and possibly a family, keep your regular work. However, spend all of your excess cash, energy, and time on your business. Don't wait to create, explore, fail, learn, and repeat. In the long term, after multiple attempts, failures, and lessons learned, your next attempt becomes increasingly likely to succeed. And as Rich Dad puts it, as a business owner, you don't have to be right 51% of the time. You need to be right only once. Make sure though that you can endure the worst case scenario. You should be able to try once more. Rich Dad claims that most millionaires lose 3 businesses before making it big. The average person has never dropped one. That is why 10% of the population controls 90% of wealth. So, which of the 5 main takeaways from Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad's Guide to Investing, have you found to be particularly beneficial to you as a beginner? Please let me know in the comments section below, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Turn on the notification bell and subscribe to our channel for more. Thank you for taking the time to watch. Stay tuned for our next video. Bye for now.